What we've been writing about in the New Statesman this week is, I think, the biggest single moment in the evolution of Labour thinking on the economy. Because up to now, we've known an awful lot about how they would like to change the NHS, spend more money here and there, and all the rest of it. But there's been a hole at the centre of the thinking, which is, how do they really expect to grow the economy, grow the British economy, to get the revenue they desperately need for so many other things from a position where we are outside the biggest single market on our doorstep? We're not part of the EU single market, we're not part of the customs union. So, what's the plan, Stan? How are they actually going to get that growth? And this week, we began to hear the answer to that, which is something which sounds a little bit boring, but is very significant, called dynamic alignment, which means that when it comes to standards, sector by sector, Britain will try to stay very close to EU standards as they evolve and as they change, not just now, but in the future. Of course, a lot of these standards, these rules, are now global rules. They're not just EU rules, so we'd have to abide by them anyway. And many of them were first created by British bureaucrats and British politicians in the days when we were inside the EU. Nevertheless, this is not some great big new treaty whereby Britain comes much closer to the EU, as I had expected. What this is a series of single sector-by-sector deals. So there'll be a deal around pharmaceuticals and chemicals. There'll be a deal around aspects of manufacturing, mutual recognition of professional standards, agriculture, food, all sorts of other things. So there'll be a series of quite small-sounding deals which will add up to a much closer engagement with the EU, and that will allow much more friction-free trade and tariff-free trade than we've got at the moment. And that is, I think, a very, very important part of the Labour plan. Whenever you come out with a story like this, you're worried that you've got it wrong. And since the piece came out, I've spoken to the former Governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, who said he thought it was an extremely good plan and the way forward for Britain. I've spoken to Jonathan Powell, who was Tony Blair's Chief of Staff in the Blair years. And again, he says, this is indeed the way forward. This is how it has to be. And I've spoken to the German ambassador in London, who tells me that there's a lot of traffic between Labour and Brussels and Berlin, particularly on the German side. Keir Starmer has spent a lot of time with Olaf Scholz, the German Chancellor. Germany seems to be being particularly helpful in helping form this Labour policy. People have been going back and forward the whole time. So yeah, this is real. It's quite big. It's happening under the surface. There won't be one big announcement saying, hey guys, this is what we're doing for political reasons, but that is what's happening. We had some very strange choreography during the time of Davos, because Davos is where, famously, the World Economic Forum gathers together every year very, very senior politicians, presidents, prime ministers, monarchs. You've got the grandees of Silicon Valley. You've got the big merchant bankers. You've got all those people gathered together in a huddle talking about the future of the world economy. So it's not the kind of place you would expect a Labour leader to happily rock up. It's the kind of place you would expect Rishi Sunak with all his wealthy background. But Rishi Sunak wasn't there. Rishi Sunak was in Morecambe in Lancashire handing out government money in the Levelling Up Fund to various communities up there. It didn't go terribly well for him. He was done for not wearing a seatbelt while broadcasting.
Hi. One of my New Year's promises to you was to grow the economy.
He had a lot of trouble with Tory MPs who felt that their area should have got more money and that area shouldn't. So it was a slightly grimy squabble.
Our high street, Mr. Speaker, is on its knees. So will the Prime Minister meet with me and Dudley Council to discuss our levelling up bid and how we can ensure success in the next round?
Well, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is a great advocate for his constituents.
And, of course, the great big British Volt dream battery factory, our entry into the world of the electric car and electric motors, that went under. That failed in the same week. That was going to be a huge generator of jobs in Blyth in Northumberland, and it's not going to happen. So it wasn't a great week for Rishi Sunak, to say the least. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves alongside him, they're almost joined at the shoulder at the moment, you may have noticed. They were being lionised, they were being introduced to people by Tony Blair. A lot of the big banks, a lot of the big investors around the world were talking to them. This is really important for Britain, because in the next 10 or 20 years, there is going to be a massive green industrial revolution around the world. We hear talk about it the whole time, but it's now happening. President Biden is putting $369 billion of subsidy and help into trying to make America the absolute world center of the green industrial revolution.
This investment in environmental justice is real. It also provides tax credits that will create thousands of good-paying jobs, manufacturing jobs, on clean energy construction projects, solar projects, wind projects, clean hydrogen projects, carbon capture projects.
The EU, having been worried about this plan for a long time, is now launching its own version.
Our 800 billion investment plan, the Just Transition Fund and other instruments across the economy is unprecedented investment in clean technology across all sectors of the green transition.
So when it comes to world capital, looking around for saying, where are we going to invest? Where are the jobs going to come from? Where is the really cutting-edge technology going to be based? They'll be looking at the EU. We're not part of that. And they'll be looking at the United States. We're not yet part of that. And Britain is in danger of being left out. So without being silly about it, British politicians do need to persuade world capital to come to Britain and invest in a British green industrial plan. Labour has a plan on about the same timescale as the EU, and I think it was really important and very useful, not just in terms of mere politics for Keir Starmer to be there, but for Britain in the future if it gets a Labour government. And of course, through all of this, we're observing Keir Starmer and seeing some quite noticeable changes in the Labour leader at the moment. He is more comfortable in his skin. He's more relaxed. He smiles much more. He seems to enjoy the set-piece arguments in the Commons more than he did. But I think the crucial thing is that this is not a man who really likes politics, likes the game of politics at all. He was late into politics, he keeps saying that, and he doesn't feel comfortable with it in many ways, which is why my kind of people, the commentariat, keep saying that, he's not glamorous enough, he's not inspiring enough, he doesn't speak well enough, all that kind of stuff. That's not the sort of person he is. I think what emerged out of the conversations he had at Davos when he kept saying, he didn't like Westminster.
Davos or Westminster?
Davos.
Why?
Because Westminster is too constrained, and it's closed, and we're not having meaning.
I think this is someone who doesn't like politics, maybe in some respects isn't that good at traditional politics, but really wants to be in government, really wants to govern and have the levers of power and change things.